So you see that the military is the ones that set the precedent. They're the ones that set the narrative that these objects in the sky were of interplanetary origin, that they're alien. They're the one that set the tone, precedent, narrative, and that's been the consistent thing since then. Now, the same group, military, is also saying that it's not of alien origin, but they're something else. They could be Russian, they could be Chinese, but they don't even know now. But you see that the military is getting involved with changing the narrative now. But why? And that's what we're going to discover, because I want you to see the origin of this, and that they have and always had enough information to know what these things are, what they're capable of. And even in cases that it's suspected or alleged that they have crafts that they re-engineered to be able to try to understand how they're able to use propulsion systems that are not privy to the civilian or private sector. Rather, they're of a different origin to be able to produce different types of propulsion system using anti-gravity to be able to use the gravity and be able to thrust their crafts in speeds that our propulsion systems like jets cannot do. So let's continue to see what's really going on with this as we start to really peel this onion open. Let's take a look. Then we have 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, the first American case of an alien abduction where they were taken out of their vehicle and then led into a craft where different experiments were done on the both of them. And then we had, a few years after that, another prophecy was fulfilled. Israel takes Jerusalem, where Zechariah 8:7. Remember, we just did 8:6, now we're doing 8:7, and it said, and they shall dwell, God is speaking, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God in truth and righteousness. So we see in the first verse, Zechariah 8:6, we see that God brought them back to Israel. 8:7, God brought them back to Jerusalem. So far you see how Zechariah 8:6, we see how God says he's going to bring them back to the land. Then we see 8:7, God brought them even closer to Jerusalem. So we see that this parallel of prophecy happening, and then at the same time, this weird anomalies of UFOs, flying saucers, and abduction happening at the same time. Why is that? Let's continue to find out. Now we're talking about the last prophecy, Zechariah 8:9, where we're talking about the temple being rebuilt. So we see that in the Zechariah 8:9, the last prophecy remaining is that the temple needs to be rebuilt. So I want you to notice a biblical prophetic pattern that's happening. That as Zechariah's prophecy is happening, where God brings them to the land, there's some UFO incident that happens. When God brings them closer to Jerusalem, there's another UFO abduction incident that happened. And now we have this last prophecy where they'll they'll rebuild the third temple, and we have only ideas of what will happen, but it will be within the same context, within the same narrative, within the same space of UFO, aliens, abductions, etc. But it's going to be on a heightened scale. Something else is going to trigger, but will be within the same space. So we see this consistency here, and I want you to notice that Israel and what's happening with Israel relates to this topic of UFOs and abductions that's happening across the world. Now, going back to September 61 about Betty and Barney Hill, the first Americans that was abducted, I want you to see what they talked about. They talked about they were on a craft and they were taken by these small grayish beings with almond eyes, long fingers, 6 fingers, 6 toes, I think, and then had slits for mouths. And they were taking his sperm, and other abductees were also given accounts how their sperm was taken. Women would also have their ovaries taken, their eggs, in which they would then create a fetus, and then the fetus would then be taken out of the woman and put into a gestation tube, in which they would then grow, and as they grow, they became hybrids. And then what would happen is periodically the abductees would come back or be abducted again and start to raise these hybrids from children to adolescents to teens to adults to help them understand what being human is. What is a doll? What is a spoon? What is a ball? How to act human. They would be enlisted to not only birth these different hybrids, but they will also give teachings and lessons about what it's like to be human. And then as they grew up, they have these adult looking hybrids where they look almost human, but they don't act human. They have qualities that are human, but they don't seem human. And this is and from this account of the abductees, it is suggested that they are also integrated into the population. Now, a lot of this is pulled from this this researcher here, Dr. David Jacobs of Temple University, who's been studying this phenomena of abductions for decades. Now, I want you to listen to what Dr. David Jacobs says about this specific phenomena as it relates to these different hybrid beings and how how abductions happen, how women are conceived with these fetuses and are taken out, and they grow to be hybrids to later then be used as a means of being students for the abductees to teach them how to be human and later integrate them into society. And this is from his book, The Walking Among Us, which I've just purchased. It's a really good book. I don't get paid for this. This is not an endorsement, but it's a very good book in understanding the abductees' experience from this phenomena of, quote, alien abductions and how this hybrid program is happening. But this is what Dr. Jacobs has to say about this topic.
But in fact, it was unimaginable to me when I started doing this research, what this was all about. Just not imaginable. I could not have ever imagined where I'd be today with this phenomenon. And I have kicked and screamed all the way through as I have slowly moved. People say, oh, well, hybrids are here, and I just blew all that stuff off. And now I think to myself, in my own research, where I can have control of it, and I know my weaknesses, and I know the weaknesses of the methodology, and I know the strengths of the methodology, I now can say to myself that this is an integration program and that hybrids will be integrating into the society and might be doing it now. And I can't get away from that. I can't rationalize that in any psychological way.
In terms of Dave's marshaling the evidence, it's all pointing in that direction. I mean, there isn't anything in it that you can read as being a divergence into, oh yes, they really want to come and learn about our computers or hear our music or become artists or who knows what, or cure cancer. We don't get that. We don't get anything that diverges from this. Yet, this we're talking about is really a future thing which we do not understand yet fully. In human terms, anthropomorphic terms, it does look like ultimately some kind of takeover.
So per Dr. Jacobs and his associate and colleague Bud Hopkins that does this research for years on abductees, he finds that people are being taken across the planet, and what's happening is the ovum, sperm is being taken, creating a zygote fetus. Fetus is then put in the womb, taken out, then DNA is changed into that fetus to make it grow into this hybrid, and this happens and repeated to where they grow, where they birth more hybrids, so the end result is the hybrid looks as human as possible, and now we see they're integrating into society. But the thing I wanted to make clear is this. We have seen this before in Genesis 6. Take a look. Genesis 6 talks about these sons of God, these fallen angels that came down, saw daughters of men and married them, lots of them, and impregnated them and gave birth to these giants. It says here in verse 4, there were giants on earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God, which means fallen angels, came to the daughters of men, conceived with them, and bore children to them. It says here, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts and his heart was only evil continually. And it says here, the Lord said, I will destroy man who are created on the face of the earth. Now, this is why I want to point this out, is because look at this. Here we have Genesis 6, where ungodly beings from the sky influenced and manipulated the human race by conceiving with women and producing a hybrid race of beings called giants, and other ones called men of renown. God then sees that from the result of this, we see the Lord said that there was a great wickedness on the earth, and that the thought and intent of man was only evil continually. So these beings from the sky came down, conceived with the human race, produced hybrids, and that was an accelerant of evil that caused mankind to just get even more evil. And God responded by pouring his wrath on the earth. In this case was the flood. Now we fast forward today, we see this could happen again. In the near future, these ungodly beings from the sky will influence and manipulate the human race again. And as a result, Jesus warned us. The result of that, he said, take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come saying that I am the Christ and will deceive many, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. And as a result, we see Revelation talks about how God will pour his wrath via the bowls on the earth. So we see the same pattern of these beings from the sky accelerate the evil of man's heart on the earth. God responds by destroying it. And we see again the same pattern happening as we speak. But I want to pay really close attention to this right here, where God says, take heed, that he says that take heed that no one deceives you, which means that the start of the end times begins with deception. He said when it begins with deception, when asked when it's going to lead to his return, he starts it with make sure no one deceives you. Many are going to come and say that I am the Christ and would deceive many. Well, who are these many that he's talking about? I'm glad you asked. Now, if the US military and Pentagon is stating that these are not alien beings, since they set the precedent in the beginning in the 50s saying they are interplanetary alien beings, now the narrative is changing that they're not, then what are they? It's simple. It leaves only for them to be spiritual beings. That's what's happening here. They're changing the story so that Satan can then change the world and change the narrative for the world to accept them as spiritual beings. So tell me what you thought. I really hope this was edifying to you. I hope you learned. If you did, leave me a like, comment, and definitely share this to others so we can get them all aware of what's going on and happening in the world today.